a voice of reason all throughout the course of the pandemic. Someone who's helped facilitate sporting events back well before we even had fans in the stands. She was working on this stuff. Patty Olinger, infectious disease expert, the executive director of the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. And Patty, I just want to check in with you because, we're doing especially well in Florida now. We've had over 50 consecutive days of a decrease in spread. Peak to now, we're down 88% in cases. So all this going on, what are you seeing from your perspective?
We're seeing that all across the board. We still have pockets, especially where you have, a lower rate of vaccination rates. But, right now it's starting to look like we're at least heading towards this pandemic maybe waning, and, it'll probably become what they call endemic, meaning that it'll be with us and something like the flu. But right now is that time that we need to still be a little vigilant as we're heading towards the holiday season. And I think that's when we want to all get back together again. So those things that we've been learning, especially like, things that we know, if we're at higher risk right now, okay, you might want to wear your mask if you're in a big social gathering. Wash your hands, social distance when necessary, especially as we're going into this first big holiday season as the pandemic is starting to wane.
Yeah, Patty, I've started asking smart people who know stuff and have been right during this pandemic the question about 1918 specifically. So, I followed this from the onset of the pandemic because history does tend to repeat itself. And indeed, it's not perfect, but it's been pretty darn close. If you take a look at the 1918 pandemic, there are a total of 4 waves. 3 that were somewhat significant, and that's where we are right now. And the 4th wave was actually the weakest, and it did occur over the winter and what we consider the traditional flu season. And then that was the end of it. It also was, start to finish a total of, it was 24, 26 months. And that would also be just about perfect in terms of the timetable next spring. So what say you about the trajectory of this deal being 1918?
That's a really good thing to look at, and that's what you're right. We look at things in the history that we've seen. The one thing about the 1918 flu is that, over time, because we had that 1918 flu, we had, some immunity built up over time, as well as, the vaccines, the flu vaccines. They try and, pinpoint what happens every year. We still have deaths every year. And I think that if we look at the lessons that we've learned, especially if there's a silver lining that's coming out of this pandemic, I think that in today's world, from a science standpoint, we can do better with indoor air considerations, we call it, the ventilation systems. And also, I always love that, and of course, I am in the cleaning industry, but that whole terminology of routine cleaning, what does that mean? I think we've learned that routine cleaning doesn't mean that it just looks nice and smells pretty, that we do it correctly, and that it includes, making sure the surfaces are clean, sanitized, potentially disinfected, depending on the situation.
Amen. As I said from the onset, the one thing this pandemic has done is made me look normal. I was surrounded by the hand sanitizer and the wipes before that was the cool thing. Patty, you have obviously also held a pretty important role in getting sporting events back and going. I found it interesting that the Fouch back on September 7th was saying, the college football going to be super spreaders. And the only thing that college football and other sporting events have been a welcomed reprieve for people that have wanted to, have excitement again during the course of this pandemic. With people like him advising the president, what are you hearing in terms of the people that are ever going to let this thing go at the point where it is endemic, which we might already be just about there? Do you think they're going to try to hang on to this pandemic?
That's a good question. I don't really know the answer to that, but I think that you have, people are a little hesitant to say, okay, let's just open everything back up, which we really have. Let's face it, look at those football games. And you do see a correlation between, mental health and when we see the sporting events coming back. and people are ready for it, and they're willing to do whatever they need to do. The other thing is that we're seeing that some of these events are having requirements for high vaccination rates. Or vaccination passports, or whatever you want to call it, and even like trade shows. What we're finding in trade shows and mass gatherings, like exhibitions, is that when we do monitoring, when they monitor what the vaccination rates, they're averaging around 80% vaccination rate, and a lot of them also require that you provide a negative test before you enter in right now. And getting people back out and getting our economy started is so critical right now. But still, to be able to do it safe as we're heading into that, like you said, potential fourth wave during the winter seasons when we're closed inside more.
All right. I hear the pragmatism and always appreciate the information. Patty Olinger, the Executive Director at the Global Biorisk Advisory Council.